In the classic 1937 film We Shall Dance, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers introduced the world to a song written by brothers George and Ira Gershwin. The song, Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, was performed by Fred and Ginger as they roller skated together and considered their vast differences. Among other supposed irreconcilable differences mentioned in the song, the most popular line says, "You like tomato and I like tomato. Let's call the whole thing off." When we approach the worship team conversation of practice versus rehearsal, it can feel a little bit like tomato versus tomato, but it's not. This conversation is not a matter of mere word choice or pronunciation. Practice and rehearsal are two completely different things. Let's talk about this a little bit more on today's Weekly Worship Thoughts. Most worship teams I've worked with have not spent a significant amount of time considering the difference between practice and rehearsal. By default, they will tend to fall into focusing on and utilizing one or the other. A team that wrongly focuses on practice will tend to be a bit chaotic and, ironically, often unprepared for Sunday morning. Such a worship team might look something like this. The worship team comes together for their weekly practice, and many members see the song list for the very first time. Some are even seeing a specific song or two for the very first time. The entire practice time consists of team members trying to figure out most of the songs while being stopped at multiple points throughout the song to be directed by the worship leader. Direction is decided and given on the spot, though the worship leader would surely not admit to this. Notes are furiously jotted down sometimes, or not at all, but most of the note-taking is fruitless because what is being practiced and decided will ultimately be changed during the service. A worship team that focuses on rehearsal, on the other hand, is in for a challenging situation unless the team members have practiced on their own prior to the rehearsal. It does not work, by the way, to simply call a practice a rehearsal or a rehearsal a practice and think that the name change will be effective. It won't. There needs to be a function change. A worship team that correctly utilizes a rehearsal looks something like this. The worship leader gives worship team members adequate advance notice of the entire set list and any pertinent arrangement notes like key, tempo, instrumentals, etc. There is a clear understanding among the worship team that practice is what you do on your own and rehearsal is what happens when the team comes together for their weekly gathering prior to Sunday morning. Thus, each member of the team comes to the rehearsal prepared because they have spent adequate time practicing on their own. At the start of the rehearsal, the worship leader talks through each song, answers any questions the worship team members may have generated from their own personal practice time, although these questions could be asked and answered in advance as well, and the worship leader highlights key parts to make sure that each member is prepared for the rehearsal. Once the arrangements are clearly understood, the worship team plays through each song, stopping to address any problem areas or even looping through problematic spots to make sure that the team is working well together. After any kinks are worked out, the team rehearses each song exactly as they practiced it. There is no need to stop the song at any point. This is a rehearsal, and the team should play the song exactly as they intend to play it on Sunday morning. So which is better, practice or rehearsal? Well, there is a comical line in the song Let's Call the Whole Thing Off, in which the characters played by Fred and Ginger come to an important realization. After laying out their obvious differences, they sing, "For we know that we need each other, so we better call the calling off, off." The same is true in the epic battle of practice versus rehearsal. Both are important. Both have their place. Practice is what worship team members should be doing on their own, with the help of the worship leader, of course. And rehearsal is what worship teams should be doing when they come together. We will be spending the next two videos looking much deeper at the difference between practice and rehearsal, and I hope that after working through these chapters and videos and discussion questions, you will be convinced that utilizing both personal practice and group rehearsal time will yield the best, most God-honoring results for you, your team, and your congregation. So, in preparation for these next two chapters and videos, I really want to encourage you to wrestle with this week's discussion questions as an individual and as a team. Take time to really analyze where you are at currently. Are you currently maximizing your effectiveness as an individual and as a team through the dedicated private practice time and focused intentional rehearsal time? If not, why not? For many individuals and teams, they have simply never taken the time to think deeply about these things. So now is your time. Develop your own thoughts and then approach the next 2 chapters and videos with an open mind and with a readiness to grow. In your own words, what do you think a productive practice time should look like? Are you currently satisfied with your approach to worship team practice? Why or why not? What makes a great practice? What would make your practice time better? In your own words, what do you think a productive rehearsal time should look like? Are you currently satisfied with your approach to worship team rehearsal? Why or why not? What makes a great rehearsal? What would make your rehearsal time better? Do you agree that there is a difference between practice and rehearsal? What are the major differences? Do you tend to emphasize one over the other? Do you currently effectively utilize both? In what ways or why not?